daily practice is absolutely essential if you want to get better at playing the saxophone or just keep your chops up. The problem is the noise of the thing can be a real issue. For a while, my practice room was my lowly Fiat Punto that my friend gave to me. Yes, I do have a much nicer car now. I would just park on the side of the road and practice. It would get all steamy in there in the winter, and people walking by must have been wondering, what on earth is going on in that thing? I did end up giving that Punto away to another musician friend. I spent a lot of time practicing in the car. Before I had the Punto practice room, I spent months practicing in the park. And at first I thought I was going to attract loads of weirdos, but in all the hours I practiced in the park, nobody ever bothered me. If you need a place to practice, try the park or the beach or the woods. At one point, I practiced on top of a parking garage. Did you know you can practice the saxophone entirely in your head? I do this just about every single day. It's not going to help you with your sound production though, but it is very effective for your technique. You can practice scales, patterns, tunes, and even improvisation all in your head. It does take a bit of work for you to get comfortable with the process, but the results are incredible. Let me know in the comments if you'd like for me to make a dedicated video about how I do this. You can also practice really effectively with just your fingers. This is a technique I learned from Bob Reynolds. He says he does this when he's traveling around in hotel rooms. Again, it's not going to help you with your sound production, but when you take away the sound, you're left with just the percussive sound of the keys opening and closing. If you've never tried this, I strongly recommend it. Practicing the saxophone like a percussion instrument changes the approach entirely. Sound production and especially articulation can get in the way sometimes of solid rhythm. Playing with just the fingers can really expose our weaknesses there. This is the Sax Mute 1. My saxophone is inside this big plastic thing, and it does mute the sound quite a lot. I have actually played a few different versions of these mutes. This particular one is better for me than some of like the cheap knockoff ones in that it sacrifices sound attenuation for comfort for the saxophonist. So it doesn't mute the sound as much as others I've played, but it's a lot more comfortable to use. And it doesn't suffer from the problems of the low notes being completely blocked, and it doesn't get quite as humid and stuffy on the inside. Just for reference, here's what the sound is without this thing. So while this thing is not the ideal solution, it can be really helpful to have if you live in an apartment. You can use one of these things in conjunction with some of the other methods. You know, maybe the weather's not good and you can't go out and play in the park. Maybe you don't feel like getting in your car, you just want to get the horn out and play a couple tunes. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a nice thing to have when you need it. I put a link in the description for anyone who's interested in getting themselves one of these sax mutes. Another rather expensive option is a dedicated practice booth like a Whisper Room or Studio Bricks. I actually have a full review of one of these coming up soon, so keep an eye out for that. These are actually fantastic solutions if you can afford them. They're expensive, but so are saxophones, so you might have to choose between getting a new saxophone and getting a proper place to practice it. Now, for those of you who have been following this channel for a long time, some of you will remember I started out in a small room with lots of acoustic foam on the walls. This was a room I built in the storage area of the basement in my apartment building where we used to live. It was a little funky, but I loved it. I could practice down there at any time of day. We put 5 centimeters of rock wool between the outer wall and a new inner wall of acoustic sheetrock. Since it was already in the basement with a parking garage on the floor above, there was no worries about noise. Luckily, the building didn't have any humidity issues. That's always something super important to consider when putting anything underground. When we moved out of the city and into this house, I converted a spare bedroom into what is now my studio. It's not soundproof at all, so for the last year and a half, I've limited my practice to daytime hours. Getting the dedicated practice booth is going to allow me to practice anytime, day or night. In the meantime, I've done some renovations to the room and added a second door. This should go a long way in isolating the sound in here. It's extremely difficult and expensive to truly soundproof a room, so I wasn't even going to try up there. Keep in mind that the panels you see on my walls have nothing whatsoever to do with reducing the volume. They are there for reducing echo and reflections. It's just acoustic treatment that serves to improve the sound you hear inside the room. And my last suggestion for quiet practice is get yourself a wind synth. I've been playing wind synths for years. I've done several reviews, which I'll link in the description below. This one here is my favorite. It's the Emio. I like this so much, I practice on it even when I don't need to be quiet. Watch this video next to learn why this thing is so cool. And I also tell you how you can save 5% if you buy one by mentioning BetterSax. I'll see you over there.